What if I told you some of Hollywood's most legendary stars, the icons we grew up idolizing, carried secrets the cameras never showed? Hidden deformities, disabilities, and life-altering injuries, all masked behind the glitz, glam, and studio lights. Welcome to Classic Hollywood, where we uncover the real stories behind the silver screen. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 legendary actors who didn't just act their hearts out, they survived Hollywood. Stick around. Some of these stories will completely change the way you see your favorite stars. Number 1, Montgomery Clift, the face that changed Hollywood forever. Before tragedy rewrote his story, Montgomery Clift was Hollywood's golden boy, a man whose beauty and vulnerability weren't just admired, they redefined what it meant to be a leading man. With piercing eyes, razor-sharp cheekbones, and a quiet, emotional intensity, Clift brought something new to the screen. A rawness that stood in sharp contrast to the polished masculinity of his time. He wasn't just another heartthrob. He was the future of acting. Intimate, internal, electric. Films like Red River, A Place in the Sun, and From Here to Eternity didn't just feature him, they revolved around him. But then, in May 1956, everything changed. In an instant. After leaving a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's Beverly Hills home, Clift lost control of his car and crashed into a telephone pole. The wreck was catastrophic. His nose and jaw were crushed, teeth knocked out, and the left side of his face paralyzed. Elizabeth Taylor rushed to the scene, famously pulling broken teeth from his throat to save him from choking. From that moment on, Clift's face, once a symbol of near perfection, bore deep scars that Hollywood didn't know how to handle. Studios panicked. Directors scrambled to mask the damage with shadows, clever camera angles, and heavy makeup. Leading men weren't supposed to look broken, but Montgomery Clift wasn't finished. Just weeks after the accident, he returned to the set of Raintree County, working alongside Elizabeth Taylor, who fiercely defended him from studio pressure. The difference between the before and after was so stark that some fans didn't recognize him. But those who truly watched saw something deeper. A new layer of vulnerability, raw emotion born from real pain, and a soul now forever altered. Clift refused to play it safe. In Judgment at Nuremberg, he gave what many consider the performance of his lifetime, portraying a deeply traumatized Holocaust witness. He stuttered, he twitched, he trembled. Critics assumed it was all part of the character, but those close to him knew. It wasn't just acting, it was truth. Behind the scenes, Clift battled chronic pain, addiction, and depression. Yet on camera, he was still captivating. Maybe more than ever. His work after the crash became darker, more introspective, and often hauntingly beautiful. If you've only seen his early films, you're missing the full picture. Montgomery Clift didn't just survive, he evolved. He transformed tragedy into art. And in doing so, he became something Hollywood rarely celebrates. A star who was human, wounded, and brave enough to keep going anyway. His legacy isn't just about what he looked like. It's about what he endured and what he gave through it. Number 2, Peter Lorre. The eyes that told 1,000 stories. In a town built on beauty and symmetry, Peter Lorre stood out. Not in spite of his looks, but because of them. His most striking feature? A pair of haunted, bulging eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the screen. But those eyes weren't just a quirk of casting. They were the product of a childhood illness or possibly a medical condition like exophthalmos, though no official diagnosis was ever confirmed. The mystery only added to his mystique. Born Laszlo Löwenstein in what is now Slovakia, Lorre's early life was marked by displacement and alienation. He was an outsider long before Hollywood labeled him as one. And maybe that's what gave his performances their edge. His breakout role in Fritz Lang's M, where he played a child murderer tormented by his own urges, shocked European audiences and launched him into stardom. Hollywood took notice. And even though his look was miles away from the matinee idol mold, American directors saw something no one else had. Raw emotional power. His stare, wild, tragic, and mesmerizing, told stories more profound than words ever could. In films like The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, and Arsenic and Old Lace, Laurie perfected the role of the lovable menace, a man constantly teetering on the edge of morality. His characters were mysterious, misunderstood, and often menacing, but they were never one-dimensional. His gaze could make you laugh or freeze you in fear. Sometimes both. Off-screen, though, Laurie wasn't always so sure of himself. In an industry obsessed with perfect faces, he struggled with insecurity. He never spoke publicly about his eyes, but those close to him knew he sometimes felt trapped by them, typecast into roles that mirrored the darkness he tried to hide. And yet, those very eyes, the ones he once feared might hold him back, became his trademark. They turned him into a legend. In an industry that rewards sameness, Peter Lorre proved that what makes you different might just be your greatest strength. Number 3. Harold Lloyd, the one-handed daredevil of silent cinema. You've seen the image. Harold Lloyd hanging from the hands of a giant clock, high above the bustling city in safety last. It's one of the most iconic shots in film history. But what if I told you he did it with only one fully working hand? At the peak of his fame in 1919, Lloyd was doing a publicity shoot when he picked up what he thought was a fake bomb. It exploded in his hand. The blast blew off his thumb and index finger, burned his face, and temporarily blinded him. In that moment, his career and his life could have ended. But Harold Lloyd wasn't like other stars. He refused to quit. After months of recovery and painful surgeries, he returned to the screen with a custom-made prosthetic glove, designed to hide his injury from both cameras and colleagues. Audiences had no idea. Even many of his friends in the industry didn't know he was working with one hand. And here's the mind-blowing part. Lloyd didn't slow down. He got bolder. He kept performing his own stunts, putting himself in real danger, again and again. That famous clock tower scene? His left hand is doing all the work. The right, supported by a prosthetic. He didn't just bounce back. He elevated what physical comedy and stunt work could be. Unlike many stars of his era, Lloyd never publicly addressed his disability. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of losing roles, or maybe, just maybe, he believed that what truly mattered wasn't how many fingers he had, but what he did with the ones he had left. Behind his signature glasses and boyish charm was a man of sheer determination, someone who literally risked life and limb for the sake of a laugh. In an age where silent actors were expected to be perfect, Harold Lloyd kept audiences laughing, without ever letting them see his pain. The next time you watch one of his breathtaking stunts, remember, one hand was real, the other was pure willpower. Number 4. Victor McLaglen, the battered fighter who became a Hollywood tough guy. Before he was an Oscar-winning actor, Victor McLaglen was literally fighting for a living. Born in England in 1886, McLaglen wasn't trained in theater. He trained in the boxing ring, and it showed. With a broken nose, a crooked jaw, and cauliflower ears earned from years of bruising fights, his face looked like a roadmap of every punch he'd ever taken. And yet, that face became his biggest asset in Hollywood. At a time when clean-shaven charm and boyish looks were the norm, McLaglen brought real grit to the screen. His rugged appearance wasn't softened for the camera. It was celebrated. A look that screamed experience, toughness, and authenticity. Directors didn't cast him despite his scars. They cast him because of them. He wasn't just acting the part of a soldier or a brawler. He was one. He served in the British Army during World War I and was even rumored to have sparred with heavyweight champion Jack Johnson. When he made the jump to film, legendary director John Ford quickly recognized what McLaglen had. Presence. Not polished, but real. The kind of weathered strength you can't fake. In 1935, McLaglen delivered a performance that still echoes through film history. Gypo Nolan in The Informer. A broken man haunted by betrayal and guilt. It was brutal, it was honest, and it won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. From there, he became a John Ford regular, appearing in classics like She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and The Quiet Man, where he played brawling Irishmen with big fists and even bigger hearts. But off-screen, Victor was more than muscle. He was funny, generous, and deeply respected by his peers. He knew how to take a punch and how to deliver a performance with real emotional weight. In an industry obsessed with beauty, Victor McLaglen was proof that scars can tell better stories than perfection ever could. Every crooked feature on his face was earned, and everyone made him unforgettable. Number 5. Bela Lugosi, the real pain behind Dracula's cape. When you think of Dracula, you picture Bela Lugosi, slicked hair, icy stare, thick Hungarian accent. A presence so magnetic, so chilling it redefined horror for generations. But behind the cape and beneath the legend was a man in constant pain. Lugosi wasn't just performing stiffness and stillness in his iconic role. He was often barely able to move. For most of his career, he suffered from severe sciatica and chronic back pain that worsened with age. He didn't talk about it publicly. He couldn't. Not in the unforgiving world of 1940s and 50s Hollywood, where physical weakness was hidden, not embraced. And as the pain got worse, Lugosi turned to something darker: morphine and methadone. First for relief, then for survival. Addiction took hold quietly, until he did something no one in Hollywood dared to do at the time. In 1955, with his health failing and his career fading, Bela Lugosi checked himself into treatment for substance abuse. He didn't hide it. He faced it head-on, in front of the world. This was years before it became common or even remotely accepted. It shocked Hollywood. But for Lugosi, it was an act of raw honesty, the same honesty he brought to every role. Even as his stardom dimmed and new monsters took the spotlight, his legacy only grew. Not just as the first true Dracula, but as a pioneer who shattered silence around pain, addiction, and vulnerability. And in a moment of poetic, eerie beauty, Lugosi was buried in his Dracula cape when he died in 1956. As if the man and the myth were never really separate. Bela Lugosi's true horror story wasn't on screen. It was the one he lived every day, with courage, with pain, and with an unwavering commitment to his craft. The cape was theatrical, the suffering, very real. Number 6. Ernest Borgnine, the broken-nosed everyman who won an Oscar. In a town filled with perfect chins, sculpted cheekbones, and camera-ready smiles, Ernest Borgnine looked different. And that's exactly what made him unforgettable. With a broad, flattened nose, rumored to be the result of years of Navy boxing, and a face that seemed carved from experience, Borgnine didn't fit Hollywood's mold. He broke it. But what he lacked in conventional good looks, he more than made up for in authenticity. Borgnine brought warmth, grit, and real human depth to every role he played. His breakthrough came in 1955 with Marty, a quiet, low-budget film where he played a shy, lonely butcher looking for love. No action scenes, no glamorous romance, just raw emotion. And Borgnine? He owned it. Audiences connected with him. Critics praised him. And the Academy handed him the Oscar for Best Actor, beating out giants like James Dean and Spencer Tracy. In that moment, Ernest Borgnine proved something powerful. You don't need a pretty face to tell a beautiful story, but this wasn't a one-hit wonder. He went on to star in classics like From Here to Eternity, The Wild Bunch, The Dirty Dozen, and Escape from New York. Whether he was playing a villain, a military man, or a lovable misfit, Borgnine always brought the same thing: truth. He once joked, "My face has character." Before I even open my mouth, you know I've seen some hard times. And he wasn't wrong. Off camera, he was known for his humor, generosity, and work ethic. He never took himself too seriously, and he never let ego get in the way of the story. In an industry obsessed with youth and perfection, Borgnine was a reminder that what audiences really want isn't flawless. It's real. His nose might have been crooked, but his performances hit straight to the heart. Number 7. Lionel Barrymore, the screen legend, who rewrote the rules from a wheelchair. He was born into one of the most famous acting dynasties in American history. The Barrymore name practically built the early days of Hollywood. But Lionel Barrymore didn't just ride that legacy, he reshaped it. With a booming voice, commanding presence, and unmatched gravitas, Barrymore won an Academy Award, starred in dozens of films, and left behind performances that still resonate today. But behind his commanding roles was a reality the studios tried and failed to hide. By the early 1930s, Barrymore could no longer walk. Ravaged by severe arthritis and multiple hip injuries, he relied on a wheelchair for the rest of his life. In that era, a visible disability usually meant the end of an acting career, especially for leading men. But Lionel Barrymore? He didn't step aside. He stepped up. Rather than fade into obscurity, he and MGM Studios made a bold decision. They wouldn't hide his disability. They'd write around it, and that changed everything. As Dr. Gillespie in the Dr. Kildare series, Barrymore played a wise, wheelchair-bound physician, turning his real-life condition into an integral part of the character. He owned every scene with nothing but his voice, his eyes, and that sharp Barrymore wit. But his most iconic role? Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, the greedy, immobile banker who tries to crush George Bailey. Barrymore never stands once in the film, and yet his performance is so powerful, so commanding, that he remains one of the most unforgettable villains in cinema history. Behind the scenes, he endured constant pain and took heavy medication just to get through filming. But he never let it interfere with his work. He never used his condition as an excuse. In a time before disability rights, before inclusion, before awareness, Lionel Barrymore quietly made space for performers who didn't fit the perfect image. He showed Hollywood that talent doesn't need to stand tall, yes, it just needs to speak loud and clear. He didn't walk into greatness, he rolled right into it, and never looked back. Number 8. Walter Brennan, the limp that won 3 Oscars. He wasn't a leading man. He wasn't classically handsome. He didn't have the swagger of Gable or the elegance of Cary Grant. But Walter Brennan? He had something no one else had. 3 Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor. A record that still stands. And he did it all with a noticeable limp. The result of real-life injuries that shaped his entire on-screen persona. Brennan's limp was caused by a hip injury, possibly worsened by his service in World War I, and compounded by various accidents. In a time when studios tried to hide flaws, Brennan made his visible. He didn't fight to cover his uneven gait, he used it. On screen, it became part of his identity. The shuffle, the stoop, that raspy, gravelly voice. Together, they created a character that felt lived in. Like a man who had seen things, survived them, and come back with a story to tell. Directors didn't just work around his limp. They built roles around it. He played crusty prospectors, old ranch hands, scrappy sidekicks, and hard-edged mentors. Films like Come and Get It, The Westerner, and Kentucky didn't just feature him. They revolved around his ability to bring raw authenticity to every frame. And the Academy noticed 3 times. Brennan didn't look like a Hollywood star, but that was the point. He looked like someone you knew, someone real, someone you'd trust in a fight or share a drink with after one. Audiences believed in his characters, limp and all, because there was no performance more convincing than a man who had actually walked through hardship. And behind the scenes, he was known as humble, funny, and hardworking, a guy who never let ego get in the way of the story. Walter Brennan's limp wasn't a weakness, it was a signature, one that helped redefine what greatness looked like in supporting roles. He didn't just steal scenes, he shuffled into them and made history. Number 9. Buster Keaton, the stone-faced genius who broke his neck and kept rolling. They called him the Great Stone Face. Not because he was emotionless, but because Buster Keaton could deliver physical comedy with deadpan precision while pulling off stunts that would make modern stuntmen sweat. But behind that stoic expression and gravity-defying agility was a secret injury that could have ended his career. Or worse. In 1924, while filming Sherlock Jr., Keaton performed what seemed like a routine stunt. A torrent of water from a water tower hit him square in the head and slammed him into a steel rail. He stood up, shook it off, and finished the scene. Years later, during a medical exam, doctors discovered what Keaton never knew at the time. The impact had fractured his neck. Let that sink in. Buster Keaton broke his neck during a shoot and kept working like nothing happened. But that's who he was. Keaton's entire filmography is a masterclass in daring, precision, and pain. Often real pain. From buildings collapsing around him in Steamboat Bill Jr. to falling through floors, dodging trains, and dangling from moving vehicles, he did it all himself. No stunt doubles, no special effects. Just timing, nerve, and unimaginable resilience. Some film historians believe that his famously unreadable expression, that stone face, was partly a mask for the pain he endured off camera. He suffered from chronic headaches and neck pain for the rest of his life, but he never let on. Never complained, never stopped. While others chased stardom, Buster Keaton chased cinematic innovation, and he paid for it with his body. Off-screen, he was quiet, humble, and relentlessly creative. Designing his own gags, choreographing his falls, and inventing physical comedy techniques still studied a century later. He didn't talk about his injury, he didn't ask for sympathy, he just kept climbing, falling, and getting back up, until he became one of the most revered figures in film history. Buster Keaton didn't just perform stunts. He risked everything for the sake of a laugh, and never broke character, even with a broken neck. Number 10. Jack Elam, the wild-eyed outlaw who turned a childhood accident into a Hollywood goldmine one. Look at Jack Elam and you never forgot him. That wandering, off-kilter eye paired with a menacing grin and rough-hewn features made him one of the most recognizable and scene-stealing faces in classic cinema. But that unforgettable stare? It wasn't makeup. It wasn't an act. It was the result of a childhood accident, a pencil injury that left him with a permanently misaligned left eye. In a town built on beauty, Elam's face was everything Hollywood usually tried to hide. But instead of hiding it, he turned it into a career. Born in Arizona, Elam didn't start out in front of the camera. He was an accountant, working behind the scenes in Hollywood, until someone took one look at him and realized, this guy doesn't belong in a ledger. He belongs on film. He made his mark in the golden era of westerns, becoming the go-to actor for drifters, bandits, psychos, and unhinged wildcards. Films like High Noon, Once Upon a Time in the West, and Support Your Local Sheriff didn't just benefit from Elam. They were elevated by him. His misaligned eye made his characters feel unpredictable, dangerous, off balance. Whether he was playing comic relief or cold-blooded killer, you couldn't take your eyes off him. Or more accurately, his eye off you. Casting directors didn't just tolerate Elam's look, they sought it out. His face became his brand, and here's the best part. Jack Elam had a sense of humor about it all. He'd often joke about being the ugly guy who could act. He leaned into the weirdness, never self-conscious, never apologetic. He understood that authenticity was more valuable than polish, especially in a genre built on grit and survival. Off-screen, he was beloved, witty, professional, a team player who knew the power of a glance, and never wasted a moment of screen time. In an industry where one crooked eye could have ended a dream, Jack Elam made his the stuff of legend. These weren't just actors, they were survivors, innovators, rebels against an industry that demanded perfection. If these stories moved you, smash that like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. Which star's story surprised you most? This is Classic Hollywood, where the legends live and the truth finally gets the spotlight.